The other day we woke up in Lake A, and that was a completely different place to wake up to. And then here we are, a few days later, waking up to all this. A little oasis in the middle of the outback. So yesterday we were at William Creek, and I bought another sticker for my sticker board. And I'll stick this on now. I'll put it there. So that's William Creek. I got it from William Creek Hotel, Lake A. There you go. All done. We've left Lake A and we're on our way to a place called Covered Springs. Now we're on the Oodnadatta track. So this right behind me and in front of me, it's the Oodnadatta track. Now this runs from a town called Mari to a place called Oodnadatta. We kind of started halfway, a place called William Creek, and then we're heading towards Mari, but this trip we won't be going all the way to Mari. But basically this track ran parallel to the old Garn railway track. Now the Garn railway track was moved ran for many years from steam engine days right up until I think the 80s. And then they moved the track for a number of reasons. One was this was very prone to flooding, and secondly, with the modern engines coming along, diesel engines, and the way trade was taking place and trade routes were happening, they no longer needed it here, so they moved it. But one of the beauties of driving this track is that you get to see the remains of the old Garn track. We just pulled over to see this piece of history. There are other changes that happened when they moved the track to where it is today. They moved over from a narrow gauge track to the gauge that they have now, the wider gauge. Also, they moved from having wooden sleepers, which are prone to termite attacks, to concrete sleepers like we have today. And this is where the old Ghan track ran. Also, the telegraph lines ran along the railway track, and here is the remains of the telegraph line. We just pulled up to another remains of the Ghan track, and this one is actually a bridge. So there you are, there's the bridge in the distance there. So in the distance you can see some of the sleepers are still intact. Basically the track came from there. It's all buried under soil erosion, and it's underneath just where the truck is parked. So we are here now at another ruin, all related to the Ghan track, and this is called the Beresford, if I'm pronouncing it properly, Beresford ruins. And in the days back in the late 1800s, when the steam locomotives were running, they would get water for the steam engines. Now this water comes from, this is coming from the Artesian basin. The water is very salty. It's got a lot of sulfur and other salt properties in there. So that was not good for the locomotives, because it would corrode, and that could create long-term problems for them. So what they did was they pumped this water into a desalination plant, and then it was the desalinated water they used. Left of the screen is the desalination plant and storage tank. So the big rectangular tank, I assume that's the storage tank, and the round cylindrical structure is the desalination plant. What does get me very angry and sad at the same time is people who vandalize these things. I mean, this is history, and yet you get a few idiots, a small minority in my opinion, who has to come and do something really stupid. Now, in the distance from where the desalination took place is the remains of a building, a structure. I'm assuming this would have been where the caretakers, the plant operators stayed, and possibly when the locomotives stopped, maybe even like the engine driver stayed. The other day we woke up in Lake A, and that was a completely different place to wake up to. And then here we are a few days later, waking up to all this, a little oasis in the middle of the outback. Birds chirping in the background, and it's a very well established campsite, but yet it retains the that feel of the outback. Running hot water showers. Well, you gotta fire it all up, but still, basic hot water. And it's just an amazing place. And this is what I love about traveling in the outback. It's all part of nature. And one of the other things I like about traveling in the outback, which I have to mention, it happens all the time to me, is you travel on this corrugated rough roads, and the going is rough, the entire car is rattling, and then after 50, 60, 70, 100 odd kilometers, you come to a place like this, and then you realize it was all well worth it. It's in a funny way. I think it's it's a way of making us appreciate what we eventually come to. At least that's how I look at it. And you settle in for the night, have something to eat, and then down a couple of glasses of wine. Wake up in the morning to this, and what more can you ask for? I'm trying to cast my mind back to the late 1800s and how this place might have been back then. Must have been a very, very busy place, because how it all started was Back in 1887, they decided to sink a bore here because underneath us right here is the great Artesian basin, and you dig a bore here and you will get nothing but hot water coming up from the underground basin. So what they did was they dug this bore in 1887. It was opened to railway traffic in 1888, and those days it was steam locomotives that ran, so they obviously could get necessary water for it as well when it stopped here. Now basically where I am standing right now is pretty much where the rail track had run, and the train would pull up right here, right where I am right now, and they would pull up here. Afghan cameliers would be waiting with their camels to take supplies offload them from the train and take them across to the gold fields in Takula, and also to the various pastoral stations the west of here. At the same time, there's obviously be passengers on these trains, and this was a favorite, quite a popular spot for them, because there was a licensed hotel, pub, which ran from 1887 to 1953. So it was licensed and ran for 66 years before it was demolished in 1965. And then there was the wetlands itself. You see, how the wetlands came about was they dug this bore in preparation for the rail traffic. But what they didn't realize was that the saltness in the water was too harsh on the bore itself, and over time the bore got corroded, and then the water flowed very freely for several decades, and that created this unique ecosystem around here. That's why we got this little oasis in the middle of the outback. And it was only very recently, I think about 15-20 years ago, when the flow was controlled by the government, but until then this flowed. So there is still wetlands out there, and but then back in the day it's definitely a favorite spot for travelers who got off the train, not just to go into the pub and have a drink, but also dip in the hot water springs and just enjoy that. Now today, of course, we can't dip into the wetlands. However, the owners of Covered Springs campsite has actually created a little spa for us, for travelers to use, campers to use, and you can dip in there. It also still gets fed by the natural bore, and it's a wonderful place to go and in the afternoon to unwind a bit, get in there. 25 degrees centigrade water right throughout.